The Yakuza are a contradiction wrapped in a paradox, a uniquely Japanese phenomenon that honestly just defies easy categorization. They are criminals, extortionists, and dealers in violence, yet for decades they have operated with a strange, almost corporate, visibility. Walk through certain districts in Tokyo or Kobe, and you might find their offices marked with discreet gold-plated emblems, their members carrying business cards with syndicate logos. They are not merely a hidden underworld. They are a parallel society, existing in a legal gray area that the authorities have historically chosen to monitor rather than dismantle. This approach stems from a long-held and now heavily questioned belief that a visible, hierarchical organization is easier to control than a scattered network of disorganized criminals. For the average person, this meant the Yakuza were both a source of fear and, at times, a strange point of civic order. This semi-public existence has allowed them to cultivate a dual identity. On one hand, they present themselves as inheritors of a warped samurai code, bound by honor and loyalty, a necessary evil that keeps petty street crime in check. They famously mobilized faster than the government to provide disaster relief after the 1995 Kobe earthquake and the 2011 Tohoku tsunami, distributing food and supplies from the back of their black sedans. This performance of civic duty, however calculated, helped to soften their image and reinforce the narrative that they were something more than just thugs. It's a carefully constructed myth, one that plays on traditional Japanese values of duty and community, creating a smokescreen for their far more insidious activities. Behind this facade lies the brutal reality of organized crime. The Yakuza are built on a foundation of extortion, loan sharking, prostitution, and drug trafficking. Their internal codes of conduct are enforced not by honor, but by extreme violence. A mistake can cost you a finger, a betrayal can cost you your life. While their membership numbers have plummeted in recent years, falling below 20,000 for the first time in 2024, their capacity for violence and disruption remains. The long and bloody war between the Yamaguchi-gumi and its splinter faction, the Kobe Yamaguchi-gumi, which only saw a pledge to end in April 2025, left a trail of bodies and shattered the illusion of a disciplined criminal order. This strange balance between public presence and criminal enterprise is what makes the Yakuza so deeply entrenched in Japanese society. They are not outsiders in the traditional sense. They are insiders of a dark and parallel world that intersects with the legitimate one at every level. Their influence is not just felt in the back alleys and red light districts, but also in the gleaming corporate towers and the hallowed halls of government. They are a stain that has soaked so deeply into the fabric of the nation that it has become part of the pattern, a permanent shadow that shifts and changes, but never truly disappears, reminding everyone of the compromises made in the name of order. The Yakuza's most enduring power doesn't come from street-level thuggery. It flows from their deep infiltration of Japan's legitimate economy. For decades, they have operated as a parasitic twin to corporate Japan, embedding themselves in key sectors and bleeding them for profit. The construction industry has long been one of their most lucrative playgrounds. Syndicates traditionally skimmed between 4 and 5% from public works projects, a cost that was simply accepted as part of doing business. They provided services no legitimate company could offer, suppressing labor disputes, intimidating environmental protesters, and ensuring projects moved forward without inconvenient delays. Their presence was a quiet, unspoken tax on national development, a corrupting influence that twisted the very foundations of the country's infrastructure. Real estate became another gold mine, particularly during the speculative frenzy of the 1980s asset bubble. Yakuza groups became masters of jiageya, or land sharks, using intimidation and harassment to force small landowners to sell their properties to developers. They would park cars blocking entrances, hold loud all-night parties, and even start fires to drive out stubborn residents. In doing so, they fueled the unsustainable rise in land prices, working hand-in-glove with banks and real estate firms that were all too willing to look the other way. This symbiosis between finance and crime created a toxic economic environment, one where the lines between legitimate investment and criminal coercion became dangerously blurred, setting the stage for an inevitable and catastrophic collapse. The world of finance offered even more sophisticated avenues for exploitation. Yakuza syndicates moved from simple loan sharking to complex stock market manipulation and money laundering schemes. They became adept at using front companies to obtain loans they had no intention of repaying, and their enforcers were crucial in collecting on bad debts when the system turned sour. Then, there were the Sokaya, corporate racketeers who would buy a few shares in a company, dig up embarrassing information on its executives, and then extort them for hush money, under the threat of exposing the secrets at the annual shareholder meeting. This practice became so widespread that many companies paid them off as a routine expense, institutionalizing corruption at the highest levels of the corporate world. Even the glittering world of entertainment was not immune. From managing talent agencies to controlling bars and clubs in nightlife districts, the Yakuza have long had a hand in what Japan watches, listens to, and enjoys. This connection was starkly illustrated in 2011 when Shinsuke Shimada, one of Japan's most popular television hosts, was forced into retirement after his long-standing ties to a senior Yamaguchi Gumi boss were revealed. The scandal sent shockwaves through the industry, exposing a dark secret that everyone knew but no one dared to speak about. The Yakuza's influence was a silent partner in show business, a reminder that behind the glamour and celebrity often lies a network of obligation and fear. The Yakuza's deep connections to Japan's political establishment were not an accident of history. They were forged in the chaotic aftermath of World War II. As the nation struggled to rebuild under American occupation, a common enemy emerged for both the United States and Japan's conservative elite: the rising tide of communism and left-wing labor movements. In this fight, the government found a willing and brutally effective ally in the underworld. Figures like Yoshio Kodama, a nationalist power broker with deep ties to organized crime, became indispensable. He and others like Ryoichi Sasakawa mobilized gangsters to act as muscle, breaking up strikes and violently suppressing leftist demonstrations, all with the tacit approval of the authorities. This unholy alliance was cemented in 1955, with the formation of the Liberal Democratic Party, the political force that would go on to dominate Japanese politics for the next half-century. It is an open secret that Kodama channeled vast sums of money from the underworld and his war-profiteering ventures to help establish the LDP, ensuring that the new conservative government would be indebted to him and his network. The United States, focused on containing Soviet influence in Asia, turned a blind eye to the source of the funding. The priority was a stable, pro-American Japan. And if that meant allowing gangsters to have a seat at the political table, it was a price they were willing to pay. One of the most vivid demonstrations of this partnership came during the massive 1960 Anpo protests against the United States-Japan Security Treaty. As hundreds of thousands of students and union members took to the streets of Tokyo, the government of Prime Minister Nobusuke Kishi grew desperate. Fearing the police would be overwhelmed, Kishi's administration called on Yoshio Kodama to organize a private army of right-wing extremists and Yakuza thugs. Tens of thousands of gangsters were mobilized, armed with clubs and ready to attack the demonstrators. The plan was only called off at the last minute, but it sent a chilling message. The government was willing to unleash the forces of the underworld against its own citizens to protect its political agenda. This post-war pact created a system of mutual dependence that would endure for decades. The LDP received funding and a private army to enforce its will, while the Yakuza received political protection and a free pass to expand their criminal enterprises. Politicians looked the other way as the gangs grew rich from gambling, construction, and extortion, because those same gangs helped keep them in power. This symbiotic relationship corrupted Japan's democracy from its very inception, entrenching a system where political power was inextricably linked to the dark money and brute force of the nation's most notorious criminals. It was a deal with the devil that would have long-lasting and damaging consequences. If the post-war alliance was the foundation of the Yakuza political nexus, the Lockheed bribery scandal of 1976 was the moment the entire rotten structure was exposed to the light of day. The scandal was a sprawling international affair involving a major American aerospace company, but its Japanese dimension revealed just how deeply organized crime had penetrated the highest levels of government. At the center of it all was the familiar figure of Yoshio Kodama, the underworld power broker who had helped found the LDP. He acted as the secret consultant for Lockheed, using his immense influence to ensure that all Nippon Airways purchased their L-1011 TriStar jets, a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Kodama's role was not merely that of a well-connected lobbyist. He was the conduit for a massive bribery operation. Lockheed funneled millions of dollars through him, which he then distributed among senior politicians and government officials to secure their cooperation. The money was a poison that flowed through the veins of the political system, corrupting policy decisions and turning the nation's aviation procurement process into a criminal enterprise. The scandal reached all the way to the top, implicating Prime Minister Kakue Tanaka, who was eventually arrested and convicted for accepting a bribe. It was a stunning fall from grace for one of Japan's most powerful politicians, and a brutal confirmation of the underworld's influence. The Lockheed affair was more than just a case of individual corruption. It was a systemic failure. It demonstrated that the pact made in the post-war years had evolved into a sophisticated machine for self-enrichment and political manipulation. The Yakuza were no longer just muscle for hire. They were key players in a shadow government, capable of steering national policy for their own benefit and that of their political patrons. Kodama wasn't just a gangster. He was a kingmaker, a fixer, whose connections were so powerful that even a multinational corporation like Lockheed needed him to do business in Japan. The scandal laid bare the lie that the Yakuza were a separate, contained entity. Even after the arrests and convictions, the true extent of the rot was never fully cleansed. The scandal highlighted the LDP's dependence on kinkin seiji, or money politics, a system fueled by vast, often untraceable, sums of cash. While Tanaka was disgraced, the system he represented largely survived. The political and business worlds learned a lesson, but it was not necessarily to avoid corruption. Instead, it was to be more careful, to build more layers of deniability, and to ensure that the channels connecting the legitimate world to the underworld were better hidden from public view. The shadow of Lockheed would loom over Japanese politics for decades, a constant reminder of how easily power could be bought and sold. The 1980s in Japan were a time of dizzying economic excess, an era known as the bubble economy when stock prices and real estate values soared to, well, unimaginable heights. And riding that wave, both fueling it and profiting from it, were the Yakuza. They dove headfirst into the speculative frenzy, transforming from traditional gangsters into, sophisticated white-collar criminals. Their expertise in intimidation and coercion made them the perfect partners for real estate developers looking to acquire land for massive new projects. The operations reached their zenith, terrorizing families and small business owners into selling valuable properties for a fraction of their worth, clearing the way for shiny new office towers and luxury condos. But this wasn't just about real estate. The Yakuza became major players in the stock market. They engaged in insider trading and market manipulation, often working with corrupt brokers and financiers to artificially inflate the value of certain stocks before dumping them on unsuspecting investors. They also perfected the art of using their criminal enterprises to secure massive loans from banks that were flush with cash and, frankly, eager to lend. They established front companies, created fake collateral, and leveraged their reputation for violence to ensure the money kept flowing. The banks, caught up in the euphoria of the bubble, often relaxed their due diligence, effectively laundering money for the underworld and financing their expansion into the legitimate economy. When the bubble inevitably burst in the early 1990s, Japan's economy plunged into a prolonged period of stagnation known as the Lost Decade, and the Yakuza played a significant role in making the crisis worse. The mountain of bad loans that crippled the banking sector was heavily intertwined with organized crime. A 2001 government report revealed that nearly one-fifth of the bad loans handled by the state's Resolution and Collection Corporation were linked to Yakuza syndicates. When banks tried to collect on these debts or seize the properties used as collateral, they were met with fierce and often violent resistance. Yakuza enforcers obstructed foreclosure proceedings, intimidated bank employees, and made it nearly impossible to unwind the toxic assets. This obstruction had a devastating effect on the economy. The paralysis in the banking system meant that credit dried up for legitimate businesses, stifling investment and prolonging the recession. The Yakuza's involvement transformed a financial crisis into a national security problem. In a notorious 1997 incident, the home of an executive at the Japanese branch of Cargill was firebombed after the American agribusiness giant purchased distressed loans tied to mob-owned land. The message was clear. The Yakuza would not let go of their bubble-era assets without a fight. Their actions contributed to what some economists called the Yakuza recession, a downturn made deeper and longer by the criminal underworld's refusal to accept its losses. Even as their traditional power wanes, the Yakuza's shadow continues to fall across Japan's political and social landscape, a fact made starkly clear by a series of modern scandals. The idea that the underworld has been cleanly severed from the corridors of power is a comforting fiction. The reality is that old habits die hard, and the networks of obligation forged decades ago still echo today. In 2012, the nation was shocked when Justice Minister Kishu Tanaka, the man in charge of the country's laws and police, was forced to resign just weeks into his tenure after admitting to past associations with a senior member of the Inagawa Kai syndicate. Even former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was not immune, facing awkward questions over a photograph that surfaced showing him with a known Yamaguchi Gumi associate. These incidents are not just embarrassing photo ops, they reveal a persistent and troubling proximity between the political elite and organized crime. The latest tremor hit Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's cabinet in December 2025, when Junko Mihara, a minister of state, was rocked by allegations of her own Yakuza ties. Photos from a 2009 golf tournament and reports of her performing at a party hosted by a syndicate surfaced, threatening the stability of the new administration. Her office's defense, that she was unaware of their criminal affiliations and that the events stemmed from her previous career as an actress, did little to quell public outrage. It highlighted a familiar pattern. The worlds of entertainment and politics often serve as a bridge to the underworld. The stench of scandal also hung over the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, an event meant to showcase Japan to the world. Instead, it became dogged by allegations of corruption, with fears that the Yakuza had infiltrated the lucrative construction contracts for stadiums and infrastructure. Given their historical dominance in the construction industry, it was almost inevitable that they would find a way to get a piece of the multi-billion-dollar pie. While concrete proof of widespread infiltration remained elusive, the persistent rumors and reports of senior Olympic officials having social ties to top Yakuza figures tainted the event, serving as a global reminder of Japan's unresolved relationship with organized crime. These modern examples demonstrate that while the Yakuza may be weaker, their influence has not vanished. It has simply become more subtle. The blatant alliances of the post-war era have been replaced by a web of deniable associations, casual meetings at golf courses, and fundraiser appearances. Politicians and public figures have learned to maintain a careful distance, but the connections remain. The underworld still offers things the powerful desire: access to money, the ability to solve inconvenient problems, and a network that operates outside the law. As long as that demand exists, the Yakuza, or whatever form they evolve into, will be there to supply it, ensuring their shadow continues to linger. For much of the post-war period, Japan's official policy towards the Yakuza was one of containment, not eradication. The police maintained detailed records of syndicates and their members, monitoring their activities in a strange dance of reluctant coexistence. This approach was rooted in the pragmatic, if flawed, belief that it was better to deal with a visible and hierarchical enemy than a fragmented and invisible one. However, the blatant excesses of the bubble economy and the ensuing recession forced a dramatic shift in strategy. The government could no longer afford to tolerate an underworld that was actively crippling its financial system. The first major blow came in 1991, with the passage of the Anti-Boryokudan Act. This landmark legislation officially designated the major syndicates as violent groups, or giving police expanded powers to shut down their offices and halt their racketeering activities. It was a direct assault on the Yakuza's traditional sources of income and their ability to operate openly. The law was a game-changer, but it was not a silver bullet. The syndicates, masters of adaptation, began to shift their operations. They moved deeper into legitimate-looking corporate structures, using front companies and complex financial schemes to hide their activities. The law made it harder to be a traditional gangster, but it inadvertently professionalized the Yakuza, pushing them further into the realm of white-collar crime. Recognizing that the 1991 law was not enough, authorities rolled out the next phase of their crackdown in the 2010s with a series of nationwide exclusion ordinances. these local and prefectural laws were designed to sever the Yakuza's lifelines to the legitimate world. They made it illegal for any business or individual to knowingly do business with a Yakuza member. This meant gangsters could no longer open bank accounts, rent apartments, get cell phones, or even sign up for a gym membership. The goal was to make it impossible to function in society as a known syndicate member, effectively cutting them off from the economy and isolating them completely. The exclusion ordinances have had a profound effect. They are the primary reason for the dramatic decline in official Yakuza membership, as the costs of affiliation now far outweigh the benefits for many. However, this success has created a new and perhaps more dangerous problem. The old structures are crumbling, but the criminals themselves have not disappeared. Many have simply gone underground, operating outside the traditional syndicate system. This has fueled the rise of a new breed of criminal known as anonymous, unaffiliated groups that organize through social media for smash-and-grab robberies and sophisticated fraud schemes. The law has broken the old clans, but it has unleashed a swarm of something far more chaotic and unpredictable. While the Yakuza are quintessentially Japanese, their criminal ambitions have never been confined to their home islands. For decades, they have operated a global network, with tentacles reaching into Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Their international activities are as diverse as their domestic ones, encompassing everything from drug and weapons trafficking to human smuggling and large-scale financial fraud. In parts of Southeast Asia, they have established deep roots, collaborating with local criminal organizations in the narcotics trade. In the United States, they have focused on money laundering through real estate in places like Hawaii and Las Vegas, and have been involved in smuggling high-end contraband. The United States government has long recognized the threat. In 2011, President Barack Obama issued Executive Order 13581, which designated the Yakuza as a significant transnational criminal organization. This move placed them in the same category as the Italian mafia and the Russian mob, allowing the U.S. Treasury to freeze the assets of syndicates and their leaders, and prohibit American citizens and companies from engaging in any transactions with them. This was a direct assault on their ability to use the U.S. financial system to launder their illicit profits. The designation also spurred greater cooperation between American and Japanese law enforcement, leading to increased intelligence sharing and joint operations aimed at dismantling their global networks. A stark illustration of the Yakuza's global reach and dangerous ambitions came to light in a stunning 2025 case. Takeshi Ebisawa, a senior leader within a Yakuza syndicate, pleaded guilty in a U.S. court to an astonishing plot, attempting to broker a deal to sell weapons-grade nuclear material. He had sought to trade plutonium and uranium, allegedly sourced from Myanmar, in exchange for a deadly arsenal of military-grade weapons, including surface-to-air missiles, for an ethnic insurgent group. The case, the result of a complex DEA sting operation, was a chilling revelation. It showed that the Yakuza's activities had escalated far beyond traditional organized crime into the realm of international security threats. This case sent shockwaves through the global intelligence community. It proved that the Yakuza were not just a domestic Japanese problem, but a menace with the connections and audacity to deal in the world's most dangerous materials. The fact that a crime syndicate was attempting to become a player in the black market for nuclear components was a nightmare scenario realized. It underscored the urgent need for international vigilance and cooperation in combating these groups. The Ebisawa plot served as a brutal wake-up call, demonstrating that as the Yakuza are squeezed at home, their most ambitious and dangerous elements are looking abroad for new and terrifying opportunities. Today, on December 22, 2025, it is tempting to write the Yakuza's obituary. Their membership is at an all-time low, the old guard is aging, and the legal framework designed to choke them has never been stronger. The once feared syndicates are a shadow of their former selves, their public presence diminished, and their finances under constant assault. Yet to declare them irrelevant would be a grave mistake. The Yakuza's legacy is not just in their current numbers, but in the deep systemic corruption they helped to create. The political and corporate worlds are still grappling with the consequences of the decades-long pact with the Underworld, a relationship that has stained Japan's international reputation and undermined its democratic institutions. The decline of the traditional Yakuza structure has not eliminated organized crime, it has merely changed its shape. The emergence of the gangs, decentralized and digitally connected, presents a new and formidable challenge for law enforcement. These groups are harder to track, harder to infiltrate, and operate with a recklessness that the old, hierarchical syndicates often avoided. The violence is less predictable, the crimes more chaotic. In squeezing the old monster, the authorities may have inadvertently shattered it into 1,000 dangerous pieces. The need for vigilance is greater than ever, as the nature of the threat evolves in real time. Furthermore, the Yakuza's influence persists in the quiet networks of power that still connect business, politics, and the underworld. The recent scandal involving Minister Junko Mihara is a potent reminder that these ties, however deniable, have not been completely severed. The culture of money politics remains a vulnerability, creating opportunities for dark money to influence policy. As long as powerful people seek off-the-books funding or extra-legal solutions to their problems, there will be a market for the services that groups like the Yakuza provide. They are a symptom of a deeper institutional malaise that Japan has yet to fully cure. Ultimately, the story of the Yakuza is a cautionary tale about the compromises a society makes in the name of stability and the long-term cost of those bargains. They are more than just a criminal organization. They are a reflection of the hidden cracks in Japan's social and political edifice. Their persistent shadow serves as a constant reminder that the fight against corruption is never truly over. The battle may no longer be against tattooed men in black suits operating from high-rise offices, but against a more insidious and fragmented threat that continues to exploit the weaknesses the old syndicates helped to create. The dragon may be wounded, but its spirit endures in the shadows of modern Japan.